Here are 5 investing tips for share market investors to follow when you're actually going about buying individual companies. So before we get into this, you obviously need a share brokerage account to invest in Australian shares. You might also need a separate one to invest in overseas shares, like from the US market. But the same principles apply. Tip number 1, avoid industries altogether. For example, if you're investing in an industry like gambling, maybe that's not something that you want to be invested in. So you can actually exclude that from your investment universe by simply refusing to look at companies in that industry. The easiest way to know which industry a company falls into is to go into your brokerage account, and in there it will say what industry it is. It might be telecommunications, it might be gaming, it might be casinos, it could be anything like that. Just take a look at that industry and determine whether you do or don't like it, and you can just easily not invest in it. So tip number 2 is about actually reading the company's annual report. An annual report is a big document that lives on the company's website or in your brokerage account under the news section for the company that you're looking at. And in the annual report, you'll find everything. You'll find financial, like numbers and accounting, but you'll also find things like the chairman's letter or the CEO's message, which is their words written to you about the company's performance and the operations of the business. And you'll be able to find out what the company actually does, what it's doing, what it plans to do, and you'll be able to decide for yourself if that sits well with you from a sustainability or an ethical perspective. Now this is really important, this next bit. You've got to also go down into the segment report. The segment report is further down the annual report, and you'll be able to find in there all of the different operations that the business is running. So if it has, for example, I don't know, maybe it's like involved in one industry, but then it has another little business in another industry. What we want to find out is what different businesses are sitting within this overall business, and do we feel comfortable with that? It's called the segment report. You'll find it further down. One last thing, and this is an important one, is sometimes you've just got to keep digging on the company. Some companies, like there's a company on the ASX called Aristocrat Leisure. Aristocrat Leisure is actually a software business, but it builds software for the gaming industry and online games, which is something that you might not be comfortable investing in. So online casinos, would you be comfortable with that? If you just go to the About Us page on the company's website, you might find more like PR speak, things like we develop tools for creativity and all of these different types of buzzwords. But it's not until you actually understand what the software is used for that you find out it's online gaming, which is something you might not be comfortable doing. Now, this is not necessarily a knock against that company. By all means, that might be ethical to you. It's just to point out that sometimes you need to dig below the surface. And the way you do that is you go to the company's annual report and find out what the operations are, what products it makes, how it makes them, and who it's selling it to. And that's all found in the annual report or in the segment level data, which is further down the page. Tip number 3 is actually trying to find if the company has a sustainability report. So if you look on the ASX, there's a big company, a big bank called Commonwealth Bank of Australia. Now, Commonwealth Bank of Australia is a bank that you know. It's a large company, one of the most dominant in the country. But they actually issue a sustainability report. And you can access that, and the easiest way for me to tell you how to find it would be to search for the company name and then sustainability report or ethical report or social principles or whatever it might be. You have to get a little bit creative in Google or whatever search engine you use, and you're looking for a document. Because even though companies do have their ESG reporting included in their annual report, sometimes they don't. And sometimes they include more information in a separate document. You know, in this case, the sustainability report for CBA. But even companies like Cochlear, which creates the implantable hearing aids, that has an entire different section of its website, different reports and different reporting factors that are not included in the annual report. The only way you can find that is if you try and search for it either in the investor relations part of the website or just in Google or on the internet. So that's a sustainability report. And some companies have it and some companies don't. Same in the US or overseas. Many companies report on it, some don't. How about when it comes to workplace culture or the way the company treats its managers and staff and stakeholders in general? How can you actually understand that as an investor looking at a company? Do you have to know someone that works there, or can you call up the CEO? Oftentimes you don't have either of those two things available to you. So what you can do is you can use 2 websites, one for Australian companies and one for international companies. So you probably know the company called Seek, and the Seek website helps you find a job. But what they use the website for nowadays is actually allowing you a potential employee of a company or an outsider to actually go to the company's page. So for example, let's say you're looking at investing in Telstra, but you're worried about the workplace culture because you think it might be toxic or something. You go to the Telstra page on the Seek companies, and then you look at the different ratings that the employees have given the company. So they might rate the company for management, for their take on the social aspects of the business and the operations, or for how they approach gender equality, whatever it might be. You can read the reviews of the company and you can find out if it's a good or bad workplace and something that you're comfortable investing in. For international companies, you use a website called glassdoor.com. It's exactly the same process. Find the company page on Glassdoor and do your review. But I want to add one really important caution. Oftentimes, the people who do a review of the company often have something negative to say. So you want to make sure that you're not just taking one really bad review and using that as your basis to form an opinion on the company. So take that information, use it to your advantage. Another thing to keep in mind is that some companies need a harder workplace culture. So no beanbags, no fruit on arrival, and ping pong tables at your leisure. Some companies, like in the construction industry or those in sales type companies, need that kind of alpha personality type to work in and be successful in that company. So the company incentivizes sales or hard work or something like that. And that might not suit everyone. So you might end up with some bad reviews on the company's page. But just keep that in mind, that you've got to look at multiple reviews and try and find common patterns throughout. And you've got to remember what type of business it is that you're researching. Tip number 5 is explaining the investment to someone. Someone you respect, or a friend, a family member, someone like that, that maybe they don't even need an interest in investing. You can just describe what the company does, and you can explain why you're investing in it and why it might be risky or how it could go wrong. Then that person can give you feedback. I find this incredibly powerful. I have a little checklist that I take to a friend, a family member, a colleague, or my partner, and I say, this is what I'm investing in. Here are the big risks that I've found. Like, this could go wrong with the business, and this could go wrong with the investment, and then they can give me feedback. But what is really important with this is when you explain it to someone, you actually realize that there are a few blanks missing. When they ask you questions, you're like, I don't know what that means. I'm going to go find out, and I'll get the answer, and then I'll reflect on it. And that process, which was popularized by someone called Richard Feynman, who was a physicist, he actually used that to try and understand the world in a new way. And you can do that with your investing. You can explain it to someone, and they can help you understand if you know enough about the company too. So that's tip number 5.